Jigdo, Debra, Jingelo. gongba lamay shilel dishi nyamni longdu emaho.
Okay, so welcome to the foundation. We say Ngöndro, which is the preliminary class. So today I'll talk about the Buddhist path in general. The general path of the Buddha's, we need to understand that the Buddha's teaching does not believe in the Creator or Almighty God and so forth. Why are we here in this called cyclic existence? It's because of our own karma, and what we are experiencing is called the result of whatever we had planted in the past. So affliction is the cause of the seed, and what we are experiencing now is the result, the consequences of whatever we have planted. So if you are experiencing happiness, is the result of good karma that we had done in our past. If you are experiencing pain and suffering, is the result of negative karma that we had engaged. So that's how Buddha teaches. Buddha's first turning of the wheel is called the teachings on the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is called the truth of suffering, the noble truth of suffering. So this situation of ours, for example, what we have is all conditioned. So this arises from the nature of suffering, and that's why there's the fundamental suffering, which is also called the pervasive suffering. So everyone within cyclic existence is conditioned or subjected to that. We have, birth, aging, sickness, death, like that. And then we have what we call as the suffering of the change. And at this very moment we might experience. Now you can sit there, you can put over there, here, behind Mark. You can move a little backward. So we might experience happiness now, but soon as the karma of that happiness comes to an end, then that changes into suffering. So that's called the suffering of the change. And then when we experience suffering, on top of that which we have experienced, more suffering fall on us. That's called the suffering of the suffering. So these three kinds of sufferings are what is pervaded within cyclic existence. So that's why samsara is called the nature of suffering. But where does this suffering come from? It's not handed to us by some power, or it's not we are put on some kind of test and so forth. This all comes from a cause. So then Buddha teaches the origin of suffering. cause of suffering or the origination of suffering. So the cause of suffering is the seed, and what we are experiencing is the result of suffering. So this origination of suffering and the suffering, these two are called as cause and the result of samsara. And further on, Buddha goes on to explaining or teaching that we can free from samsara. That state that is free from suffering is called nirvana, or the state of Buddhahood. That's the result, but in order to achieve that result, then we need to engage in the cause, which is the truth of the path. So that state which is free from suffering is called the state of cessation, or this state that is free from suffering. And what brings forth that state is the path, cultivation of the path of the cessation of suffering. So those two are now the seed and the result of nirvana. So that's the basic teachings of the Buddha. Then understanding this nature, then how we have acted, or how we have engaged in this behavior, how we have habituated and like that. So understanding that suffering is caused by ourselves. We all wish to be free from suffering, yet what we engage is completely being clueless, foolish and stupid, and yet we engage in suffering. So although we want happiness, but we, the cause of happiness we destroy as if they're like our enemies. That's what is taught in that. So then all this, samsara, further on, Buddha goes on teaching that this what is called as the cycle of existence, which goes round and round because of our own karma. At times when we have accumulated good karma, then we accumulate or we take birth in the higher realm called the human realm, the demigod realm and the god realm, like that. And when we have accumulated bad karma, then we take rebirth in the lower realm, like the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm and the hell realm, and like that. So like that, it goes on and on. At times we have good karma, we are born. So this cycle we have never been able to break. That's why it's called samsara. That's why we call cyclic existence. That word samsara, or korwa in Tibetan, is called the cycle. The cycle of birth and death, and birth and death, and taking rebirth, countless lifetimes of rebirth in different states, and then plunging down into the lower realms and trying to escape from there and barely making through again. This is what we, so looking at that kind of suffering, so how can we free ourselves? How can we free ourselves from that? So as Buddha mentioned, that there is a state which is free from that. It's called the state of cessation, or nirvana, or Buddhahood. But in order to achieve that, we need to engage ourselves on the path, like that. So that's how we need to go about. So then to do so, then we rely on someone. Whom can we rely upon? Could we rely on the worldly gods? No. They themselves are trapped in samsara. How can they help us? So we need to find someone who is free from suffering. So Buddha, who has transcended samsara and nirvana and attained fully and complete Buddhahood. So if we take refuge in that Buddha, then that refuge is infallible, is undeceivable. Otherwise, taking refuge in some kind of worldly protection and so forth, we are not guaranteed. It always fails. So that's why, as a general practice of the Buddhist path, then we take refuge. When we take refuge in the Buddha as the teacher. And we take refuge in his teachings as the path. So teaching as the path also, whatever he has taught, what we need to abandon, what we need to adopt. So then we take refuge in the teaching as the path. And then there are those who have adopted that path, and there are those who have excelled and advanced and so forth. They are called the spiritual community or the Sangha. So we take refuge in the Sangha as the guide, that they can help us traverse this path or walk on this path to bring about the state of Buddhahood like that. So the general Buddhist path begins by taking refuge. As I mentioned last time, that unless we have taken refuge, we don't really enter into the path. So as I mentioned last time too, that word we call Buddhist now, or the follower of the Buddha, it's called Nangpa, the one who has turned within or one who has turned inward. So the person who has turned inward and one who has not turned inward are called the still facing outward and so forth. So the difference between one who is turned inward and who is not turned inward or outside, the distinction is made through refuge. When you take refuge, that's the point when you then become someone who has turned his or her mind or his or her quest within. So that person then becomes someone who is following the path of the Buddha. So that begins like that. So, and in doing so, then we also need to understand what is Dharma. So when we take refuge, we bring this intention, we cultivate that intention, that Buddha, like a doctor or a physician, we ourselves like afflicted or a sick person. So in order for us to get rid of this or cure ourselves from this illness, what is our illness? Our sickness or illness is our affliction, our confused state of a mind that constantly generates desire, hatred, ignorance, pride, jealousy, and so forth. So that kind of mental state. In order for us to free from that, then we need to rely on the Buddha. So we consider ourselves as a patient, the Buddha as the doctor, his teaching as the prescription, and then in order for us to heal ourselves from that affliction, from that illness, then what we need to do is we need to follow according to the prescription, what we need to adopt, what we need to abandon. So that is the way of how we need to regard the Buddha's teachings and how we need to approach that. Okay, so this is like the fundamental, the basic of the basic of Buddha path. Need to so in our practice here in the foundation class, in the preliminary practice, we enter in this way. First we need to also train our mind. When we train our mind, we need to contemplate on these 4 thoughts. So next time bring a notepad so you can write it down. First of all, contemplating on how fortunate this life is. And when we talk about fortunate human life, there are 18 qualities that we need to check. 18 qualities. If you are born in the hell realm, there's no time to practice Dharma. The torment, beings who are in the hell realm, they are tormented by heat and cold. They have no time to reflect. They don't even hear the words of the Dharma. There's no time to practice Dharma. If someone is born in the hungry ghost realm, they are tormented by the suffering of hunger and thirst. That they haven't, let alone seeing food. They have not even heard the name of food and drink for eons and eons. They are tormented by the kind of suffering of hunger and thirst. And then if you're born as an animal, you are so dumb, stupid, and then, in the suffering of that animal realm, abused. Abused or used as beast of burden, or for food, or made them to work and so on and so forth. So those kind of suffering, you see, they're abused. So that kind of suffering. If you're born in a barbaric country where the Buddha's teachings have never arrived, there's no way for us to practice Buddha Dharma. So, hell, hungry ghost, animal realm, and barbaric country. If you're born as a long-living god, like in a god realm, where you have long lifespan of, then you are completely lost in distraction. You don't even care about Dharma. You don't even care about, understanding life and so forth like that. And the sixth one is, if you have wrong view, if you generate a wrong view toward cause and effect, cause and result, karma, then you have no regard for the teachings of the truth. Then there's no way for us to understand or connect with the Dhamma. I'm just going to make it brief. If you are born during the time when the Buddha does not appear, there's no light, there's no teachings, light that dispels ignorance. So that one. And then if you are born with our senses impaired, like being mute or dumb, like that, then we won't be able to comprehend the teachings. So those are called the 8 unfree states to practice Dhamma. If you are in any of those realms or births or any of that kind of condition, then we are not free. So since now you can checklist this one, you can see, am I a being in the hell realm, hungry ghost, animal, or if I'm born in a barbaric country and those kind of things. When we see that we are not born in any of these 8 conditions, then we say we have the leisure, we have the freedom. So we have the freedom to practice, meaning we are free of that unfree state. We are free of those states that are unfree to practice Dhamma. So those now are the 8 freedoms. So then we say the 10 endowments. 10 endowments, and we need to check within ourselves. 10 that are 5 that are independent, 5 that are dependent. So to be born as a human being, to be born as a human being, we need to, so, and then to be born in a centrally located place, meaning where the Buddha's teachings are thriving. when the Buddha's teaching are still existing, so two. And then the third one is our senses are intact. None of our senses are impaired and so forth, so senses intact. And then we have not committed any of the serious karma. If we had killed our parents, if we had hurt a bodhisattva, or if we have caused harm to the Buddha and so forth, these are called very grave karmic actions. So they are called, if we have done those kind of thing, in the Buddhist tradition we talk about when the consciousness leaves the body, for example, when death happens, the consciousness kind of does not understand that it is dead. So the consciousness still thinking. But after a while, when the consciousness realizes that, oh, I'm parted, I'm separated from my body, like that, and then all of a sudden starts panicking and searching for a body or looking for a body or hunting for a body, like that kind of that state, before we take another rebirth or before we fall into that avenue of birth, that is called the intermediate state. But someone who has committed this kind of very serious negative karma, for them there is no intermediate state. The moment that their death happens to them, their consciousness plunges into the inescapable hell. So that's why that kind of action, that kind of karma is called very, very serious. Someone who has who has a very extreme view of karma, meaning who has completely holding extreme negative or wrong view, like that. So if we haven't done that kind of thing, so we haven't engaged in that grave negative karma of wrong view, so we have the fourth one. And then the fifth one is having devotion, faith and devotion in the Buddha's teachings. So those five, now you can tick that one. Being born as a human being, centrally located, with the senses intact, haven't committed any of those serious, extreme negative karma, and then I still have faith. So this five, if you have that, then now you can correct the five independent endowments within you. Now the five that are dependent conditions are that the Buddha has to come. The Buddha has to come in this world. Buddha only appears, like the historic Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, appeared when human beings' lifespan was 100 years old. Buddhas don't appear, when human beings' lifespan are very long, and they don't, at that particular time, their mindset is not really ready for the Dhamma. So there are times when Buddha don't appear. So when the Buddhas don't appear, then that's not the right condition. So Buddha has to come. That's the first dependent condition. And Buddha coming, not just coming, but the Buddha has to teach the Dhamma. So Buddha has to teach the Dhamma, that's the and then the teaching has to still prevail. The teaching has to be existing. The teaching doesn't become extinct. It's still abiding, like that. And then there are practitioners, that there are people who are actually practicing the Dhamma, the lineage, and like that. And then someone who practices that teaching embraces us under their love and care. So 5 of those, check out that. So if you have that or not, then those are the 10 endowments. So altogether becomes 18. So there are 8 freedoms, and the 5 independent endowments and the 5 dependent endowments altogether becomes 18. So this is, so when you look into that kind of birth, then we call that kind of birth as precious human birth. Precious human birth is very precious. There are many, many conditions that trigger to have this kind of condition. Some people are born as human beings, but they don't have time to practice Dharma. They have never met or encountered the Dharma like that. And those kind of birth are not considered precious human birth because these conditions are not complete. Yeah? So then in our preliminaries, we need to contemplate this precious human birth I have attained. And there are reasons how did we achieve this precious human birth. It's not just by chance. It is because of cause that we had engaged in great practice of generosity in our past. We had engaged in great practice of discipline in our past, moral discipline in our past. And we had engaged in great aspiration to be born, to be able to connect to a teaching or to some kind of teaching that would dispel this ignorance or darkness. So those are. And then, on top of that one, then we engage in like a vast accumulation of merit that caused this precious human birth. So anyway, I'm just telling you this because this is how we need to enter into the Buddha path like that. And in order for you to learn more, then study, for example, like the Words of My Perfect Teacher. It's a good book. It's Words of My Perfect Teacher is the commentary on the preliminary practice. Or you can read the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So this is the way of how we need to enter into the path. There's like a way that you set yourself into the path. And if you can, when you enter into the path, you also need to first investigate if this path is correct or not, if this path can take you to Buddhahood. Then if you understand that, then that is what is called as the path that is complete and unerring, complete and without any kind of mistake or any kind of errors. If you rely on that, then sooner or later you'll gain realization and then achieve the state of Buddhahood like that. Okay, that's the way to do. And so these are called mind training. Then the next one is that of course I have this fortunate human birth, but it can perish any moment. So contemplating on impermanence of life. Then if we die, where are we going to go? Are we just going to go like into a dead end? No, but whatever experience we have in our mind is going to trigger our next birth, because that's what we are saying. That if we have affliction in our mind, that will give birth, or that will result into the state of whatever experience we have. So then we talk about cause and effect. That cause and effect, infallible cause and effect. So that's why we need to abandon non-virtue, cultivate virtue, like that. And the fourth one is understanding that cycle of samsara. Remember? That because of good karma you once happen to be in the higher realms. And then when that is exhausted, you plunge into the hell realm, and then you are tormented by suffering, that intolerable suffering, and so on and so forth. But then our aim is to transcend that. How can we transcend? Then we need to think about the essenceless of samsara. So then, if we do that, then we can enter into the Buddha path. So the first two, contemplating a fortunate human birth and impermanence of life, then saves us from the distraction of this life. If we don't think of preciousness of this life, we'll just waste our life. We think, oh, this is just, everyone has this kind of life. So what's, I don't see any specialty in this. We squander this life. And then if you don't contemplate on impermanence, we think, maybe I will live for some time, and we never care to practice Dhamma. So these two, contemplating on this, then we can practice Dhamma now. We can appreciate this life. We can appreciate the preciousness of the teachings. We can appreciate that time is a factor for us. Before death comes, that we need to accomplish this Dhamma. Like that. The two others, contemplating on infallible karma and the essenceless of the defects of samsara. These two are that our goal transcends samsara. We are not just aiming to achieve some higher form of life in the next life. We are not aiming to attain some kind of life form in the God realm or in a glorified life. So these two, the two latter ones, are then contemplating on that one, that we can transcend samsara. So these four are called the mind training of the four thoughts. If you contemplate, if you think about this clearly and bring this sincerely to our heart, then our mind turns towards something that desires, that mind turns towards the path. And then that is the point where our mind is now perfect. Mind becomes the perfect vessel to take refuge. That's the way to go. Okay. Think like that, and then we'll practice today. Okay. Beginning page 1. Okay. So first of all, in order to start practicing, we need to bring in our mind the precious motivation that why we are practicing this is to awaken all motherly sentient beings to the state of perfect and complete Buddhahood. To do so, then we'll here engage in the accumulation of the preliminary practice.
Go La maison est tombée, Gami Sengi Todande, Modiri do Janzeba, La maison la chasse. La mituni Ngondro Desemito tombena Nandasola Lenepa La mitula chasete Kitemida chivi chujinye kidele junge ruwane Kunsun kuwa junye jazuna Junye dalo chula Disun chanchu nimbo mato parai lama kunchu sumla Disun chanchu nimbo mato parai lama kunchu sumla Disun chanchu nimbo mato parai lama kunchu sumla Kame sunde pruwa mato parai magyo simje gunye pendedu Kame sunde pruwa mato parai magyo simje gunye pendedu Kame sunde pruwa mato parai magyo simje gunye pendedu Tsirava kyunje luda longje pe soni zoje kunjo samawe Tsirava kyunje luda longje pe soni zoje kunjo samawe Tsirava kyunje luda longje pe soni zoje kunjo samawe Kusum Puji Wonji Yonzo Vajra Guru Kaya Vara Siddha Siddhi Lama Vishu Ranti Yele Nga Ritwa Tenji Lani Ramshita Gumbu Pamela Sawade Salam Puan Jumbai Chiyelo Gumbu Pamela Sawade Salam Puan Jumbai Chiyelo Gumbu Pamela Sawade Salam Puan Jumbai Chiyelo Ludam Shikisa Che Ngöndro Pamba Mebata Shikini Jubash Ludam Shikisa Che Ngöndro Pamba Mebata Shikini Jubash Ludam Shikisa Che Ngöndro Pamba Mebata Ngondro nye bema june shiru Udo ekandro mambu goi jiji jesu daro Jinji labje shiru usu guru bema sidi Oye ye nubjang sama bema kesa endombo Shamsen chogi ngondro nye bema june shiru Udo ekandro mambu goi jiji jesu daro Jinji labje shiru usu guru bema sidi Oye ye nubjang sama bema kesa endombo Shamsen chogi ngondro nye bema june shiru Udo ekandro mambu goi jiji jesu daro Jinji labje shiru usu guru bema sidi
Okay, so that's how we do the preliminary practice from the opening prayers all the way through, like that. And then in this foundation practice, we are required to do 100,000 prostrations, like I showed. But the prostration has to be long one, the stretched one. You have to go completely full on the floor, like that. So, and then every time you go down, then you pull one bead. Along with the prostration, you recite the 4 lines. That is 2 lines refuges, 2 lines bodhicitta. So the refuge goes on. That means from now until attaining the heart of awakening, I take refuge in the Lama, who is the 3 jewels. Then the refuges, from now until samsara is emptied, I'll accomplish the benefit and happiness of all sentient beings who have been my mother. So you recite this line, this junction like that. So you keep on. But you keep record of the prostrations. So along with that, you can recite as many numbers of times the refuge and bodhicitta. But you cannot go slow. You have to at least say these two sections within one prostration. So you can say more than one or two, it's fine, but at least you have to get, because that way then when you have done 100,000 prostrations, you also have accumulated 100,000 refuges and 100,000 bodhicitta. And then the mandala offering here, where you have the mandala offering that shows like this, that's the mudra. You have to learn to make the mudra, okay? And then further on, then you are initiated into the tantric path of, you are introduced to Vajrasattva, the practice of purification. So we'll talk more about that. Okay, go to page 63. Page 63, we'll do the dedication. And it's important, whatever we do, we need to, whatever merit that we have accumulated, then we dedicate for all motherly sentient beings. 62, it's before that one.
62.
Mm-hmm.
This is 58.
Could you change the text?
You can use this. 63.
Mm-hmm. You use that one. Sonam de yen tamje zigban nen tomne nebe danam pamje shin kega nache balon tromba ye sembe tsole drowa sho jambe pawo jentara kemba dan kundu zambo deyan dejin deda gungi jeso dalo chen gewan deda tamje rabdo Desum shebe gewan tamje ge ngowa gangla chodo ngaba de dage gewe zawa deken zambo cheche rabdo ngora ge jangshu semcho rimbo che mage banam ke juz keba nyamba meba dang gongne gondu pelwara sho jangshu semdai midraj Chanchu Jella Shewan Dang Sangye Namge Yongzun Shin Duge Lenang Pangparash Chanchu Semba Namge Nen Joden Tola Ngondro Shong Gombo Yene Gangong Pa Semjen Namla Dejur Semjen Tamjen Dendan Denjur Cheng Ngöndro Tamjen Dandu Dongparash Chanchu Semba Ganda Sarju Pa Dendan Gunge Melam Dru Parash Gewa de yen nuldu, gewa gun sonnam yeshe zozo, sonnam yeshe le jongwe, damba gunni tobash. Rinchen getsu de yen towa gun, tandu dambe chentan medra chen, ranchen dene zoba tarchen, chenga drobe jeden zebarsho, pende junne demba peljurj. Tersar Ngöndro chela jejur chen kelkam Ngondro Tashi gejur rogun chamje sangye tom juru chen lama kokam zangwara sewa dem chondo kuzen rewara so tele darjin gebar sewa dem lama dan rewa mebar jinjin kandu kemben gewan tamje do tore yenden dünden dobar Gema tadu chedan trejur je tsujen drube rawa yebar. Deryan lama damba ne je chen nendan zendu chelan jebar. Chendo nene nimbo dendro den sede sebe janzo gawash. Sebar dambe cheran tenje chen shenben rola chongel mepa. Labchen jenden chore mepa. Tamchen chamchen sangye tombara sho chenzul deyan nende kyo koroj chogen tandro kundo janjur lojen bemo rabdo geje chen sangye temba darjen ge parash Lungri tebe mi shen jimlen menga sambe terzom naj. Gomjo yege nelo jishin se shara songe nawa ge barasho.
Kemba chu samay ringoy che zame sa samay chakar pe jogi chu samay nawadam mi re su samay
Ngondro risum langa chigu ngang kodan yeshe rol para jamle. Sabsan eljur chembe nyamlen la yerme toki tigle rojesh. Kewa kundu yanda lama dan jalme cheke bella lonje. Sadan lamge yende rabzo. Palden lame gopan nuruto sho. Om Ahom Benza Guru Pema Sindhi 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 Om Ahom Benza Guru Pema Tetenza Benzar Samaya Sindhi Pala Om Ahom Benza Guru Pema Tetenza Benzar Samaya Sindhi Pala Om Ahom Benza Guru Pema Tetenza Benzar Samaya Siddhi Pala Hum Okay, those of you online, okay, everyone stay well, okay. We'll see you in the next class. Bye bye.